Good afternoon. This is your host, Jamal Baraka from Garbage Tier Media. Today we're going to be talking about Bird Box, probably the most popular horror film in recent memory. At the time of this video, Bird Box has been seen by 45 million viewers, and it's probably the most popular film on my timeline right now, and I'm including that with Aquaman, Mary Poppins, Bumblebee, and it's just crazy. This movie is based on a novel. It's directed by Susan Bier. It stars Sandra Bullock, Trevante Rhodes, John Malkovich, and Lil Rel. You know him from Get Out. It's set at the beginning of apocalypse situation, kind of like Walking Dead, but instead of zombies, we have interdimensional beings or entities from another world. And the popularity has somewhat surprised me because after watching the movie with my wife, I thought it was terrible. And I don't want to spend a lot of time doing a review of the movie because I just wanted to get that opinion out there. I thought the movie was bad. So if you like this movie, you don't want to hear it crapped on or shit on or anything like that, you may not want to watch this video, or you may just want to just listen to a different opinion, because I'm going to make some suggestions here of how the movie could have worked a little bit better. And I suspect, without reading the book that is based on, that some of these changes may already be in the book. And I ordered the book, but it hasn't made it here yet. So I may revisit this topic down the line once I read the book and get more insight into the story. My biggest problem with the movie is that the narrative focus seems off. Mallory, who's played by Sandra Bullock, is shown to be somewhat distant from her from the idea of being a parent, and she has connection issues. I don't know how deep those connection issues are because the movie doesn't really get in depth into it, but whoever she got pregnant by is not in the film. We get no ideas about what happened with him. I'm guessing it was a one night stand or maybe a oops situation, like oops, I got pregnant. She doesn't really accept the idea of being pregnant from what we see. So this comes into play with the children and all the promotional material for the film, but in the movie we can contrast that to what we see when the movie flashes back from the past to present day, that the kids really aren't treated as anything more than props or burdens for the characters. So neither one of these kids have personality. They're just there. They aren't even given any names. They're called boy and girl. So, we have God of War where Kratos calls his son boy, but he has a real name, Atreus. In this movie, the kids don't even get names until the end of the movie. So there was a video game, just a sidebar, the Ghostbusters video game that came out. The lead character that you play in that game doesn't have a name, and that's because evidently the Ghostbusters hired somebody initially when they first franchised out, and something happened and that guy died. So you came on and it was treated as a joke, like, hey, you don't want to get connections to these people, so we're not going to name them. I suspect that this is what's going on with Bird Box, but the film doesn't focus on that aspect of the character as much as it needs to be, so I don't feel the connection between these kids that I feel like I'm supposed to have. I know that they're important to the lead character. I know she feels responsibility to these kids, but I don't know what's going on here besides them just being there. They're trying to survive, but it's not like the connection I have with my kids, or you've seen in other movies or shows like The Walking Dead. Like, this isn't a Rick Grimes, Carl situation. This is just Sandra Bullock going through the motions trying to save these kids. I would have liked to see her training these children or spending time with them in situations that where there wasn't as much heightened danger. I would have liked to see more personality out of these kids. And then we're also supposed to believe that they're all traveling through rapids for like more than 24 hours, and these kids are like 5 years old. So in order for them all to be able to coordinate and make this trip, the kids would have to be somewhat trained or at least have an idea of what the danger that's outside. I don't get that impression from this movie, and I feel like there's a whole subplot here that's missing that would have fleshed in this scenario a little bit more. As it stands, while I'm watching the movie, I'm like, man, I have 2 kids, and I can't imagine my kids being able to get through this for more than an hour or 2. They've been out here for 5 years. So, like, jumping right into the movie, the crux of Bird Box is that the characters are unable to see the entities that are hunting them, and the bandanas that they wear are the only things protecting them. But the thing is that the entities are very inconsistent about their presence and how many there are or what the rules are for this setting. We know that you can't go outside for too long without getting exposed and possibly killed. But at the beginning of the movie, when the apocalypse is first coming into view, the lead characters are all looking outside. So when they look outside, they see people committing suicide, and they see the events unfold. During this time, none of the people in the home are killed or none of them die. But by the time we get to the end of the movie, being exposed for even a few seconds is like instant death. And there's various points in the movie where characters are able to go outside without their bandanas or mask, but it's always for like a few seconds. So if you can't go outside at all, that totally undermines the basis for the film. You have these birds that are able to act as a warning signal for the entities being present, but if you can't take your mask off at all, why do you need the birds? You just would never take your bandana off, and that's a huge problem for the film. You also have a narrative trick, or you have a trick in the movie where whenever the monsters are around, and this is more for the audience, I think, the wind picks up. So if you have the wind picking up, you don't necessarily need the birds. If you have like a stiff wind come your way, you know that the monsters are around. So I'm thinking that may be more for the audience that's watching the movie than the actual characters in universe. So to fix that, what I would do is I would remove the wind element from the film altogether, and I would make it so that the only way to really know that the entities are around would be by the reactions that your animals have. Your animals would just start freaking out even though nobody's around. So the audience would know that the danger is there, but you won't have different ticks like the wind, so you don't undermine the plot of the movie. I would also explain why the birds are special. My assumption would be that because birds are fairly harmless, small birds are fairly harmless, they may be immune, and that other animals might also be subject to being possessed and committing suicide. One of the things I noticed while I was watching the movie was that there were no other animals around. No dogs, no cats, no mice, nothing. There's no animals. And that's kind of a plot hole for me. What I would have done is to fix a lot of these elements as far as the entities would be to make it so that it's clearly established that the monsters are not always around. The movie doesn't really make that clear, so I'm guessing that if you had it spelled out, the rules were spelled out better, you probably could see the lead characters go outside from time to time without their bandanas, and then have the birds really be established as the warning signal, so that if the birds start chirping, they can put their bandanas on immediately and move out of danger. So this would make the movie work a little bit better, and then you maybe could see the characters go outside for short periods of time, make camp outside, or they would be able to at least see what's going on, because as it stands, anybody could take them out. Like, let's say, for example, Mallory and Tom, they go outside and a pack of dogs attack them or something. They have no defense, because there's, on top of not being able to see, you don't even know where the danger is coming from. And it could be anything. Somebody could be 5 feet away and just shoot them with a silencer. The possessed people, for the most part, seem normal other than being possessed. So somebody could just walk up and pop all of them in the legs with a silencer, and then walk up and take the bandanas off. I mean, if this is what's really going on, it seems that the writers didn't take into account that it just seems that they were outside for too long under these circumstances, and they don't have the bandanas are a crutch, but it's not really established how the entities operate. And I think this is probably something that maybe spelled out a little bit better in the book, but in the movie it's so inconsistent. I have no idea how many monsters are around, what's the danger, and are you able to, and it's established pretty clear that you can't have your bandanas off for more than a minute or two. That doesn't seem realistic. Set some parameters here. You can go outside. The monsters, you might be able to travel for weeks without seeing one, but when you see one, you need to put the bandanas on. And this is would help the movie a lot. It'll help a lot. Another thing that bugged the hell out of me, it was too many plot conveniences in this movie. Okay, so we have the only characters that appear to be alive in this movie are the people in the house in the past. So nobody had the idea to stay in their homes. Nobody else thought to go to the grocery store or the local grocery chain or hardware store, nothing like that. Our main group of people have a grocery store employee. That's the guy that's played by Laurel, and he happens to be writing a story about the end of the world. And on top of all of those conveniences, our lead character Mallory and another woman in the movie, Olympia, are both pregnant at the same time and end up going to labor at the same exact time. I call shenanigans right there. So in order to fix those issues, what I would do is I would have either a panning shot, or I would show people going in their houses, boarding up the windows and sealing themselves in. Or maybe later in the movie show examples of evidence of camps out in the field, so that you can see that civilization was going on, people were outside, and people were alive. The impression that the movie gives is that everybody else outside of our characters are dead. And other than that, the people that are left are possessed. It doesn't quite make any sense that our characters would just be so lucky that they would be the only people around. I'd also drop the element that Rill was writing a post-apocalypse story, or I wouldn't put that information out immediately, because it comes off as being just an exposition dump. I would change it and make it so that he's the one that says, hey, let's go to the grocery store. And I think that the conflict of the past situation would be that our team of characters would be trying to make it to the grocery store to stay. They would all leave the home because they ran out of food. They got to get to the grocery store, and Charlie has the access to the building. So that would be the crux of the past scenario. How do we survive out here? We have these monsters out here, and we also could see how they develop strategies for survival, so we can see the beginnings of that in the past, like how they first ran into the possessed people, or finding, out that they were going to have to use other senses to survive rather than just their eyesight. That would have been worked better, rather than all being trapped in a house and trying to fight about who's going back to the home and why do we have to leave the grocery store, because I think that they never should have left the grocery store, and that bothers me about this movie altogether. And even going back to the store, one of the people in the grocery store is possessed, and you could have kept that story, and that would have tied into the character that they let into the house. It could have been the same situation. They went into the grocery store, the guy in the store is possessed, And the whole scenario could have played out differently. He could have infiltrated the camp and then showed that he was freaked out, possibly, and we could have moved on from there. Going along with that, with Olympia and Mallory going into labor at the same time, that didn't make any sense. So what I would have done is that I would have made it so that the only reason Olympia got into the home in the first place was that she was carrying a newborn, and that her having a newborn would have been all the connection that was needed to form the relationship between her and Mallory that was needed for the movie. So nothing else would have been changed. Both of them would have still had babies. Psycho guy would have came in and still done his thing, but at least you don't have the scene where they're both going into labor at the same time, because that was like really off-putting and almost cut the movie off at that point. I also might have flipped the script and made Olympia the person that was possessed, and that she used the fact that she had a newborn to get into the house so she can take out the other characters. Piggybacking a little bit to the last major problem I had with the movie, the whole raft thing was just totally, it doesn't make sense. And what I would have done would have been to edit the raft plot, or at least change it drastically. Being on the rapids for any length of time is hard. So being out there for like 24 hours with 2 5-year-olds just seems unrealistic. To change that, what I would have done was I would have set most of the travel on land, and I would have just had the lead characters travel through a variety of areas. So I would assume that this probably is what happened in the book, but the movie only has a small budget, so they probably couldn't fit all that stuff in. So the question at that point would be like, okay, well, Brandon, Jamal, BJ, whatever your name is, why would they leave the grocery store? And I have an answer for you. They've been in the store for 5 years. Supplies are running low. Certain supplies may be running low. People inside of the grocery store got sick with something simple like the flu or some other basic illness that would be pretty easy to solve if you had access to a hospital. So in order to get medicine, our lead characters have to leave. And I would say, okay, well, for the sake of the plot, we can still keep them heading toward the blind community, or we can just have communication between camps. Hey, there's another camp that has medicine. Gas only have like a shelf life of a few months if it's not used, so it's not like our characters are going to be driving around, so they would have to travel on foot. They can go just get some try to get some medicine. We can add tension to the movie by saying, hey, Tom is also sick, or one of the kids are sick, and this is why Sandra or Mallory has to leave, and they have to take the kids with them because the kids are sick, and we don't know how long they're going to last. So they can leave out, but they may not be able to make it back in their current situation. While on the road, I can have them travel through a small lake, maybe not rapids, or if you did rapids, I can do rapids, but the thing is, I wouldn't have them on the water for 24 hours because that just doesn't seem realistic. Maybe an hour or so, and we still have Mallory have to make that choice, which kid is going to look, or how are we going to get away. And I don't want to take that scene out because that was the strongest part of the movie for me. So you could say, well, we kept that in, but we aren't going to have the whole movie on the water. You could also have them pass through like maybe a tunnel with survivors and possessed people, or you can have them get hit by possessed animals. Anything would have been better than them being on the water for 24 hours with 2 5-year-olds. I don't think my kids at their age now, I have a 7 and a 9-year-old, I think I would have problems corralling them for more than 2 days. So there's a good movie inside of the structure of Bird Box, and I think that's why you have so many people talking about it. There's something here that works, but a lot of people are going to come out of it saying that they didn't like the movie, just like they didn't like You had some people say they didn't like A Quiet Place. You had some people saying that they didn't like The Happening. These are very similarly structured movies with similar problems. So I don't want to write the movie off, but I didn't like it, and I don't know if I'll watch it again other than to contrast it with the book once it comes in the mail. If you enjoyed it, I would love to hear your opinion about Bird Box. Would you watch it? Are you looking for a sequel? Even though I spoiled the hell out of this movie for you, if you haven't watched it already, I think it's worth your time, even though I didn't like it. You can catch me on social media at Jamal is Trash. That's at Jamal is Trash. Twitter, Tumblr, Facebook. Or you can catch me on my website, GT Media Reviews, and my YouTube channel at GT Media Reviews. And I also post videos directly to Facebook. If you have any questions or you want to run some ideas by me, I'm very open to those. If you have your own scenarios for how Bird Box could have played out different, I would really enjoy reading those. And I don't want to take up any more of your time. So once again, Happy New Year. I appreciate you spending this time with me today. And have a good one. I'll see you next time.